We came through the last financial crisis. There were very, very few motor retail failures. We need cars and we need to have them serviced. They need to be roadworthy.
There was a trading update came out of Virtue Motors this morning, and since March the 25th, they've taken 825 retail orders and 749 fleet orders. Because their call centre has still operated. They've been doing TV advertising for Bristol Street Motors as well. So they have actually kind of tapped into, as Mike said, the kind of consumer boredom a few weeks in, start to think, oh, well, we'll have a look and see what's out there. And clearly they have been getting some business.
From a legislative perspective, it almost seems like we've been trying to tax people out of car ownership, whether it's VED or BIK changes or diesel issues and mixed messages as well. They're good, they're bad, and using quite a blunt tool to kind of shape the industry. And the biggest influence of that is a lack of joined up thinking, I think, between government and the industry bodies.
Our Chinese office never really came back from New Year, in fact, but they're now fully open. We've seen Germany and Austria go through their openings. So it's given us some great learnings as we've come through the crisis on what people are doing well, what they're not doing well. So I've been spending all of my time just basically trying to give that best practice ideas to everybody and try and share what's working well.
Yeah, it's great having that unique perspective, isn't it, over across a number of businesses, really.
Hey guys, and welcome to the show. If you're new to the show, it's all about people in the industry who are doing great things and giving them the recognition that they deserve. Now, I know I'm not alone in my excitement for today's guests. I've been really excited to get these guys onto the show and get their really valuable knowledge into the hands of our automotive audience so we can help you guys to learn, prosper and grow. Now, I'm Tanisha Stafford, the co-founder of Armchair Marketing, and this is the Armchair Show. And today you're in our very brilliant hands of our host, Mark Ellis. How's it going, Mark?
Really well, thanks, Tanisha, although I'm missing the studio, obviously. I'm stuck here in my home studio. Just before we get started, Tanisha, can you tell us a little bit about how the show's supported?
So we're really fortunate at Armchair Marketing and absolutely blessed to have some wonderful partners and the support of eBay Motors Group to help you guys to learn, prosper and grow. I'm sure you're all aware that eBay Motors are doing brilliant things at the moment. So eBay, Gumtree and Motors.co.uk have all joined forces to become the eBay Motors Group. Along with their partner brands Parker's, Top Gear, RAC Cars and more, it makes it even easier for dealers to advertise across multiple sites all together in one place. So while your showrooms are shut and as lockdown lifts, you can maximise the visibility of your stock in many places all at once to help get back to business quickly. Now, it doesn't matter if you're a small dealer, giant group or whatever your size, you can get the support you need.
Thanks, Tanisha. Well, we've got three very special guests joining us, of course, remotely at the moment due to the COVID-19 shutdown. But we're delighted they've taken the time to join us today. First of all, we've got Sean Kelly, who's the Managing Director at Vines Group, who, of course, represent both Mini and BMW. Sean, how are you doing?
Tip-top, Mark. Yeah, how are you?
Very well, thanks. Yeah, I hear you've been doing the daily Joe Wicks PE workouts.
That's right, yeah. And John was trying to get hold of me this morning, but I was too busy sweating and cursing in the sitting room, yeah. And it's definitely something new for me, doing daily exercise, but I'm definitely feeling the benefit.
Yeah, if you don't already, trust me, you'll hate him by about tomorrow. We've also got Tim from AM Magazine. Tim, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you, Mark.
Good stuff, Tim. And how are things treating you in lockdown?
We've been understandably incredibly busy. Trying in the kind of initial weeks to keep tabs of the implications of lockdown. The support that the government's been putting in place has kept us particularly busy. Me and my colleague Tom. Now we're just kind of looking forward to and kind of keen to observe dealers getting ready for the other side, making the best of it really, and managing.
We've also got Mike Jones on the line from ASE Global. Mike, how are you?
Superb, thank you. How are you?
Really well, thanks. Yeah, we were talking just before the show started that you had two rather useful presents, didn't you, just before the lockdown?
Yeah, for Christmas, my missus got me a Peloton bike and a pizza oven. So I've been using both extensively during the lockdown period to put on and take off the pounds. So with the aim of coming out of this sort of on a level playing field, I saw yesterday that somebody said you're either going to emerge a hunk, a chunk, or a drunk. So let's see where we end up.
True. There's so much you can do during lockdown, but I think pizza and cycling is by far the best thing, I think, really. We're here today. We are going to talk a bit, obviously, about COVID. There's no getting away from it at the moment, and it'll be fascinating to see what the three of you have to say about it, really, and your unique experiences about this situation. Thankfully, you all come from very different areas of the industry, so it'll be very, very interesting to hear your thoughts on that. But before that, as always, we like to get to know our new guests and have a bit of a chit-chat about the industry in general. Mike, what's your current, your journey into your current role been?
I've been in the industry basically all my life, or certainly since the age of 2, when my father decided to ditch his job as a Ford dealership accountant and set up his own business. And he's been in the motor trade, or the business has been in the motor trade ever since, initially doing management accounts and then working on auditing and advising clients, and then increasingly on data collection and publication. I disappeared off, qualified as an accountant, and went and worked in Canada, and then came back and I've been in the business now for 15 years, or just over 15 years. As it's expanded on a global basis, we now have offices across all the different continents, and which has given us a really interesting perspective on this crisis, because our Chinese office never really came back from New Year, in fact, but they're now fully open. We've seen Germany and Austria go through their openings. So it's given us some great learnings as we've come through the crisis on what people are doing well, what they're not doing well. So I've been spending all of my time just basically trying to give that best practice ideas to everybody and try and share what's working well.
Yeah, it's great having that unique perspective, isn't it, over across a number of businesses, really. Sean, I think you've been in the industry for over 20 years now, is that right?
Yeah, but compared to Mike, though, I'm still a veritable virgin, really. 20 years in the business as opposed to man and boy from the age of 2. But yeah, I started off life as an accountant. As Mike will know, that doesn't make you a bad person. And I've done 20 odd years in the world of BMW, actually, a bit on the OEM side and then a bit on the dealer side. So I've seen kind of both sides of that coin. In terms of joining BMW, I was effectively binned out at interview stage. So I applied for a role. I saw a nice advert in the Sunday Times for somebody to work for the OEM and got a rejection letter because I had no motor trade experience. They were unable to find who they were after, and kind of I went through in the sort of second stage, really. So I worked for BMW for about 5 years, and then I was encouraged out, if you like, because they felt I was a little less polished than perhaps they were after, and encouraged me out onto the dealer side, or the retailer side, as they like to call it now. So I worked for Vines. I joined them as FD in 2003. A couple of years later, I was in the right place at the right time to get the keys for the shop. We're a £200 million turnover business, 3 sites in Surrey and Sussex. We only represent BMW Group products, so we've got a fairly limited but knowledgeable base around that part of the business. And we're 40 years with BMW this year. We've held the franchise since 1980.
Fantastic. What a lovely history. And like you say, 20 years isn't long, actually, in this industry at all. But a lot of people seem to hang around in it for a long time, which is always encouraging.
Yeah, I think once you're in, it's really hard to get out, actually. And, they say it gets in your blood, and I think it does. I had other jobs before coming to the motor business, clearly. But, the energy and impact of that every single day just makes you want to get up and do some more. Yeah.
Absolutely. Has that been your experience, Tim? Obviously, working for one of the largest trade publications in the industry, how have you found your journey into and continuing through the automotive sector?
Similar view to Sean, really. That once it's in your blood, it's hard to make it leave. I'm now 16, 17 years on AM. I joined as news editor and became editor about 5 years ago. But the industry, there's constant developments. There's significant change happening in the industry at the moment, even before COVID. There's always stuff to keep tabs on. And it is just a fascinating subject matter, really, to look at, to observe. yeah, we're kind of observers and reporters on it as opposed to the active participants in it. But I like to think that I've got developed kind of good relationships with dealers and suppliers, and learned a fair bit along the way. But still, there's always more to learn.
Of course there is, yeah, it never stops, does it? Mike, what's talking about observing the industry? What do you think the automotive industry does better than other sectors?
It's an interesting question, and one I get asked a lot when sort of going into the city or talking to investors. It's got a variety of different income streams, which actually historically have helped protect it against some of the peaks and troughs, or certainly the troughs that we've seen. The fact that we have this regular after-sales revenue that comes in on a sort of daily, weekly, monthly basis as people are getting their cars serviced, and we can switch really into selling people anything for from either a new car or a used car point of view, depending on what they need and what they can afford. I mean, outside of the City of London, a car's a necessity. In fact, several cars are a necessity for most for most households to function, albeit that we're sort of coping without driving at the moment, which is really quite strange. But we need cars, and we need to have them serviced. They need to be roadworthy, and so the industry, as through this variety of different income streams and through the franchising agreement, meaning that the franchise and the retailer are in it together, has helped protect against, as I said, some of those troughs and given the industry strength, really. I mean, if we came through the last financial crisis, there were very, very few motor retail failures, certainly compared to the sort of wider high street, and we've seen that continue ever since.
Yeah, it's very resilient, isn't it? Probably more resilient than people think. I think we've certainly learned that over the last couple of shows that we've done from other people.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's, you know, car's a big purchase for people, and most people, whether it's a new car or a used car, want to go and experience the car, want to drive it, want to shake somebody's hand, really. I mean, albeit it might be a long time till we get back to that, but actually want to look somebody in the eye. They're making a big purchase for them, irrespective of the actual value of the car. And so it's, you know, the physical showroom and the combination of bricks and clicks, the move to omni-channel retailing has given the industry a real strength as we've gone through the course of the last sort of 10 to 15 years. Huge level of evolution, that's going to continue, but there is a robustness there within the business model as a result of the variety of income streams.
Absolutely. And Sean, thinking about some of the challenges that the automotive industry faces, not thinking about the current situation, we'll come on to that in a bit, but what's, over the last few years for yourself, what's been some of the biggest challenges that you've experienced?
Oh, there's been a raft of them, Mark, actually, and they sort of broadly fall into a couple of camps. There's sort of societal and then legislative, I guess, in terms of the impact on us. I mean, from a societal perspective, there's around that whole car ownership piece and climate change and all that kind of stuff in terms of influencing people's decisions around personal mobility, leaving aside the kind of current scenario, clearly. And then from a legislative perspective, it almost seems like we've been trying to tax people out of car ownership, whether it's VED or BIK changes or diesel issues and mixed messages as well. They're good, they're bad, and using quite a blunt tool to kind of shape the industry. And the biggest influence of that is a lack of joined up thinking, I think, between government and the industry bodies. Because if we knew that there was going to be this migration away from diesel, we can plan for it and we can react to it, as opposed to sort of getting the kick right between our legs, which is what happened. So there's some large fundamental challenges that we've had to wrestle with, but we can't really influence those, certainly not as a sort of singleton business. The thing that we've had to wrestle with, and I think most businesses in motor retailing have wrestled with, is the predominance now of the internet and the impact of that in terms of how we're trading. It's taken quite a long time for the internet to have an impact on the motor business, I think. Whereas things like travel agents and white goods, it was an early impact on those industries. So, I mean, the internet is great from a consumer's perspective because things are transparent, whether it's pricing or funding or part exchanging your car and so on. But as an industry, I think we've done quite a poor job in terms of making value propositions on the internet. I think we've collapsed the pricing of new and used cars in equal measure. And I don't think we as a business have quite reacted to that new world yet. I think given the current pressures, that's going to change for sure, because we've got to get, if we don't get internet savvy, we're going to be run over. No pun intended. And it's been a long time coming, but I think COVID is just going to accelerate our requirement to make that a fundamental part of our business now.
Tim, do you think that's the case? Do you think the automotive industry has been slow to adapt to the digital realm?
I think it has to an extent. I mean, I remember my early years on AM, again, kind of 14, 15 years ago. I met a few dealers at the time who weren't convinced they needed websites. Life has changed considerably since then. Certainly, I would say in the last 4 to 5 years, dealers have embraced omnichannel retailing. That they've adapted to ensuring that they've got a strong presence online as much as offline. COVID has probably only increased the speed of that transition. I think it has made some dealers who previously were quite reticent about doing more trade online, made them realise that actually the technology is now there, the systems are in place, and it can and will happen.
Yeah, we may as well start talking about COVID, I think, really, because it leads nicely into this. There's no escaping it at all, really. It's dominating everything. Obviously, we're about 6 or 7 weeks into it now. You all work for very different types of business. Sean, we'll go to yourself first. What's a day under lockdown like for your business?
Yeah, well, it's mixed depending on where you are in the business. We've got a number of people who are working from home. I'm one of those at the moment, but we've equally got technicians and so on in the business providing that kind of key worker service and authority repair, that sort of thing. So for some people, they're still at work doing their, in theory, day-to-day job. Yet we've got other people like myself who are a bit remote from the business too. So the things that I'm focusing on personally in terms of trying to knit those two separate things together is around lots of communication, lots of calls and staff videos and updates and emails, etc., to keep people kind of feeling like they're part of a wider team, because we've got plenty of people out on furlough at the moment, as you can imagine. Lots of my day is taken up with planning for getting back to work and how that might look in the new normal, and we'll probably come on to that a little bit later. Plenty of stuff around cash flow management, and also not necessarily trying to look too far into the future, but certainly in terms of short-term planning around the impact that might have on our business, and sort of quick hits, if you like, with people too. So nothing more than 15 minutes, quick check-in. Are you okay? What's going on? Anything I can do to help? No, well, I'll get out of your hair then. And kind of trying to knit them together, I guess, is the easiest summary of it. I've equally been keeping fit. I mean, and I know we made a joke about Joe. That has made a big difference to me. And there's no doubt about it. It was something that I was really lax at when I was going to work every single day. And it's something I'm determined to kind of keep hold of, because I do think it's made me feel better and cope with the stress of COVID better as well, actually.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if people do keep these kind of things up, isn't it, beyond the lockdown, and how that will impact the way they work and what that brings to the industry, really. Just picking up on something that Sean mentioned there, Mike, cash flow obviously is a huge concern for businesses at this stage. What can dealerships in particular, what can they do to better manage cash flow at the moment and plan for the future?
I mean, a lot of the cash flow management work that we've been doing has sort of happened over the course of the first 4 weeks. We saw loans that the government have introduced, albeit some of them have been really quite slow to get out to people. The majority of the motor industry actually didn't qualify for the first loan scheme that came out, because they've got turnover levels above the criteria, and even the new bounce back loan scheme that's out there. It's probably too small for a motor retailer, being up to sort of 50 grand, helpful for most businesses, and that does actually seem to be flowing. The big one that's helped the industry is the furlough scheme, and I was absolutely amazed at the government's ability to get that launched and get the cash in the bank for retailers prior to the end of April. I thought there was no chance, being very honest, and I've said it so. And they need total credit for that, because it was vital. The vast majority of the retail motor sector has circa 80% of their people on furlough. So we need to, as a business, look at rates and VAT and PAYE deferrals, etc. The business needs to be maximising the things that they can do for the government, but also looking at how they can minimise their outgoings at the moment. So we've seen most people have discussions with their landlords around rent deferrals, when we can be paying that back, looking at managing the outgoings of the business. But also, one of the key things at the start, and we saw this as one of the learnings from overseas, is be really careful about what you shut down. I mean, I was preaching at the start, it was really difficult for people not to close the contact centres. We've seen overseas, as people get bored of being in lockdown, they actually start surfing for cars. And people who are ready and people who are taking orders and dealing with the customers in the way that they want to be dealt with can then give themselves a fast start for when we do reopen and maximise that income. So we've been working very much to try and hoard cash, open up all the facilities that people can have so that they've got this sort of fighting fund to get through the next few months, work out what their cash burn is and how much they do need and what they can stop and what they can't stop, but also trying to think about keeping the sort of trade going on a sensible basis. For some people, delivery works. For some people, it's not economic. So working that out, making sure that we're keeping going, but really that we're building this pipeline for reopening. I mean, everybody's itching to get going. You just, you can see it, you can feel it in the industry. People can't wait to get going again. We just need to make sure that's done in a sort of safe and managed way. But as we go through the course of the next 6-12 months, very much a cliche, but cash will be king. We need to make sure that we can keep paying the bills. And the forecasting that we've done going forwards actually sees a bit of a challenge for a lot of retailers as we come out of it and we do start to open up, because we're going to have people on board. It's going to take us a while for them to start generating income and really adding to the cash balance. There is going to be a dip as we come out, in addition to where we've been over the course of the last 6-8 weeks.
Yeah, like you say, people are itching to get back into it, aren't they? Which is positive. Tim, you've been doing some surveying over this period, I believe, haven't you? And looking particularly at things like how much support dealers are getting from OEMs. Can you share any early feedback at the moment? Anything you can reveal?
By and large, many manufacturers are being very, very helpful. They are either guaranteeing, in certain instances, they're guaranteeing bonuses. They've extended stocking plans to some extent. They're willing to help dealers as much as they can. Obviously, their own businesses will have their own issues equally, and manufacturers have furloughed staff to a significant extent, from what we hear. But yeah, we are hearing that they are being supportive. Just to touch on Mike's point about dealers ensuring that they can continue to trade in some way. There was a trading update came out of Virtue Motors this morning, and since March the 25th, they've taken 825 retail orders and 749 fleet orders. Because their call centre has still operated. They've been doing TV advertising for Bristol Street Motors as well. So they have actually kind of tapped into, as Mike said, the kind of consumer boredom a few weeks in, start to think, oh, well, we'll have a look and see what's out there. And clearly they have been getting some business.
That's great news, isn't it? Sean, have you experienced that? Have you continued to sell acceptably, manageably through COVID?
Yeah, I would definitely say manageably rather than acceptably. Let me tell you. I mean, because we are 80% down in terms of sales volume from what we'd normally expect at this time of year. But what we've seen is certainly over the last few weeks as well, the track in terms of inquiries has increased. The track in terms of sales volumes is increasing as well. So I do think there's a bit of that mission creep in people's minds kind of going back online to look for vehicles. Not quite in the Virtue Motors volumes, but we've certainly done enough to warrant keeping people attached to contact centres and stuff, as Mike's alluded to. And whilst there is an absolute desire to get back and sort of get it moving again through the business, I think we just need to all think about how we unlock that consumer momentum and do it in a really safe and controlled manner. I mean, I've said to our team from day one that their safety is the most important thing to me, and I'm not going to change that for an opportunity to flog a few cars, hours and bits, you know. So we're doing a lot of work to get our sort of house in order and ready, but that both fundamental safety and perception of safety is going to be critical, I think, in terms of moving the business on.
And what do you think that kind of reopening looks like? Do you guys have a vision for how that might potentially work? I know it's hard at the moment, obviously, you know, before Sunday and those announcements. But in terms of keeping both customers safe and that staff safe, do you have an idea yet?
My expectation is that we're a couple of weeks away, probably, from allowing the gloves to be off from Boris and the team on Sunday. Ideally, the 18th. I can't see it being any quicker than that, only because announcing something on Sunday that it's available on Monday doesn't give anybody enough time to kind of get their house in order, because you wouldn't want to unfurlough people in advance of when you actually need them in the business. So if we assume it's the 18th or the 25th and it's appointment only, a kind of click and collect mechanism, again, I think we can manage that really well. We're one of the businesses, a little bit like garden centres, where lots of our stock and facilities are outdoors, and therefore there's a perception of safety around that too. And equally, we've got big facilities as well. So even indoors, you don't necessarily need to be on top of each other too. So we've spent a lot of time over the last few weeks kind of getting that prepared and getting the environment correct in terms of signage and control and hygiene and those kind of things. So yeah, we're ready to go, if you like, when we're told we can go.
That's encouraging. That's encouraging. Hopefully, everyone else is taking that same approach in that case, Sean, because it's sounds like you're really prepared for that. Just last, before we go to a break, Mike, obviously ASE have got offices across the world. Is there anything we can learn from what other countries have done in this industry in terms of getting ready to reopen?
There's a huge amount we can learn, absolutely, and we've got a sort of return to retailing series of webinars, etc., going out next week, just purely to take the learnings that we've had. I mean, if you take Germany as a sort of very peer market for us, they've been allowed to open from a showroom point of view for a while, but customers are still quite reticent. People are quite scared, and I think we're going to see that for really quite a while. I think pushing the safety message and making sure that we don't have a big rush to maximize business immediately is going to be important. I mean, I shared a story yesterday that I personally, where I got contacted by a dealer earlier on in the week for my wife's car. It wasn't physical at the end of March, so we couldn't get it, and they were absolutely desperate to deliver it to me this week. She wants a full handover. She wants to understand the features and benefits. She wants to really get to know the car before she starts to drive it. She's the exact opposite of me. I just got a new toy and I want to drive it and I'll work it out myself. But she wants that handover. And the dealer came at me, or the salesperson, to be fair, came at me with they might be in short supply when we come out of all this. I know this brand's got thousands of these vehicles. It's a generic car. It was just a pure sales pitch, and it felt wrong. And so we've been taking advice from people all over the world as to what they've done well, what they've not done well, how we operate in this sort of hybrid that we're going to have for quite a while, where the customer needs our help. We've got a lot of people on PCPs. We've got a lot of people with service plans, etc. They're going to need their cars serviced and they're going to need their cars changed. So they do need our help and they will need to interact with us, which is good, but they're still going to be cautious. And so we've got loads of great examples from businesses all over the world as to how they've managed that slow step forwards and actually started to return to generating some sensible income, how we bring people off furlough, as Sean mentioned, what the right time scale is, because you don't want to go too fast too early, but you've also got to be there to match the demand. And also, demand before lockdown may well be different to demand after lockdown. Is there going to be a huge demand for cheap used cars as people don't want to go on public transport anymore because they want their own little cocoon rather than elsewhere? So there's lots of great examples as to how that can be achieved. And we've got learnings from the good, the bad, and the ugly from all over the world that obviously we're keen to share.
I think there's just so many potential scenarios, aren't there? It's being as prepared as you can for each one, which isn't easy, but it does sound like the industry is gearing up to get ready for it, really.
You know, every single dealership or company that I'm talking to at the moment is just handling it like pretty brilliantly. I mean, there's so many tough decisions for business owners to be making at the moment. But when you look around you, I think it's pretty inspiring to see how everyone is really pulling together, making the right decisions, and actually working together out to figure out what the best way through this is. I think it's pretty impressive, actually, how everyone is pulled together. So incredible.
Yeah, I mean, we're all making it up, and that includes the government. You know, nobody's got a playbook for this, and it's all coming out so fast. And at the start, when we were, I was getting asked lots of questions about the government schemes, and there was no answer because they'd not actually developed it all, and it wasn't well thought through. It was just rushed out, and so you have to go based on your gut feel as to what's right. And we've actually seen quite a play in the industry as to the way that they've treated furlough staff. And some people have been quite draconian, and it's been kicking off left, right, and centre as to taking salespeople back to minimum wage and their base salaries, and that I think is going to bring quite a difference as we come out of this. The businesses that have taken a slight risk and a calculated one and the right one, I think, in my mind, and supported their staff to pay their mortgages and do all that sort of stuff, and then help them defer their debts and do whatever they need to do. And the other people who very much looked at themselves and gone, no, I'm not going to pay anything to anybody that I can't legally prove now, that I think there'll be some reckoning of that as we come out. So it's not been universal benevolence from the industry as always, but there have been some great examples of people supporting their teams and doing the right thing at the moment.
Yeah, so talking about the future of the industry, I think this question would have been very different 6 or 7 weeks ago. But Tim, what do you think I hate using this phrase, but the new normal will look like for the automotive industry after COVID?
I think the next 12 to 18 months will certainly continue to be impacted from the situation we've been in the last few months. Longer term, I think the industry will get on track, and as I said earlier, perhaps even speed up its transition. As retailers, they have to be where the customers are, and they have to serve their customers in a way that they expected to be served. And as we've seen over a number of years now, the way that consumers want to car service has changed and will probably only continue to change. So it's incumbent on the dealers to be there and to adapt their workforces, adapt their services to correspond with that.
Yeah, Sean, what do you think the future dealership looks like? If we fast forwarded, say, 10 years to 2030, what do you think it would look like then?
Okay, well, by that point we might know if the government are going to ban the sale of all petrol and diesel cars, because it's that will only be 5 years away from that. So that might well dictate how the UK industry looks, full stop. Albeit, I don't think they can necessarily make their mind up as to how that's going to work anyway. I think there'll be more consolidation, and not only at a retailer level, albeit I think that might occur, but also at a manufacturer level in terms of joint ventures and sharing resources. We've got to appreciate, cars are expensive things to produce in whatever drivetrain they've got. And therefore, over time, the capital cost of that's going to increase. Therefore, the supposed retail costs are going to increase as well. So within that framework, there has to be a way of taking cost out of the cost of retailing vehicles, and you can only do that through economy of scale or shared resources, or maybe there'll be fewer retail outlets, but they might be slightly larger, maybe more satellite sites. I think that could be where we end up, but I see 10 years from now, if half of the vehicles aren't click and delivered through the internet, hence not needing that huge physical footprint, I'd be really surprised. I do think that consumer behaviour is moving more to a immediate fulfilment basis, and therefore that's where the industry will end up. And the traditional franchise model of big showrooms and shiny cars and that, that there'll be a place for some of that, but I don't think it will be as important as perhaps it was 6 weeks ago, or maybe two or 5 years ago.
Yeah, for me that feels really strange. I mean, I love cars, so the idea of just clicking and having one delivered the next day, like Amazon Prime, feels a bit rubbish for me. But Mike, do you agree? Do you think that's something we're going to see in the future? Are we going to move towards this more instant fulfillment proposition?
I think we were moving that way anyway. We've seen, a number of the big trends happening over the course of the last few years, and a number of the brands have put out their retail visions. And I think where we are is just going to accelerate that. We've already seen a lot of the brands moving towards selling direct on a monthly payment plan, and then the retailer basically fulfilling the test drives and the handovers, etc. And I think we're going to see that. I agree with Sean. There's going to be more consolidation. It was happening before we went into this, and I think it's absolutely going to happen as we come out of this. I've had a variety of calls already from people who are either looking to buy the right things in the right place, or deciding that the whole thing is really nowhere near as much fun as it used to be. I would expect that will continue, and there'll be some businesses that are really going to struggle to pay back the debt that everybody's taking on board as we go through this crisis. I mean, ultimately, whether it's the franchisers or the retailers, we need to be able to generate enough cash to pay this debt down. And I see that's going to be a challenge for the industry as we go forwards. We're going to move to wherever the customer really wants us to be. And it's going to be interesting, the balance that the customer gets between the new norm, as we've heard about it termed, with these Zoom meetings, with doing more stuff being delivered to your house, and the experience of going around a dealership. And I think the physical floor plans of the dealerships will absolutely change, and we might move to servicing hubs and big retail centres and sort of test drives at your house. All that's going to evolve as we go over the course of the next 10 years. But I think the sort of crisis that we're in has just really pressed the fast forward button on some of that. As customers get used to doing a lot more remotely and a lot less sort of physically in dealership.
And Tim, are you seeing dealers do anything that's really exciting at the moment that you think might potentially be the future of where the industry is going?
I think there are dealers now that are using technology such as this, so that now the salesman will in effect be able to have the conversation with the customer live, and maybe even have another window open where they can start to present the finance options, excuse me, that sort of thing. So the reliance on physically being there in the showroom face to face is becoming less and less. I think if anything, the adoption of video conferencing has shown us that we can do this in other ways and still have that personal face-to-face engagement with another person.
Yeah, I wonder if it would be a similar thing with the technology behind cars as well. I mean, we read a lot in AM and lots of other publications about driverless cars and fully autonomous vehicles. How far realistically are we from that, do you think, Sean?
I think that is definitely coming. And in terms of semi-autonomous driving, you've got examples of that in the vehicles we're driving now. If you're driving some of the latest generation of products. And that will only increase as the products get more reliable, I guess, and the technology becomes more reliable. But in theory, I can see absolute sort of level 4 or even 5 or automation coming. I think the barrier to that is going to be consumer use of it. I think the vehicles will be able to do it. I think that's going to be a given. And I think if you talk to every manufacturer, that is the road that they're going down, this full autonomous position for you. Whether I'd, maybe I'm too old, whether I'd feel comfortable putting my feet up on the dashboard and hitting the button and just kind of letting the car take care of itself, I'm not so sure. So I think the capability will be there, but I think the utilisation of that initially might be low. And as things become, as people see them become more reliable, then I think that could increase. There's also, though, another knock-on effect from that. Everything's connected, Mark, isn't it? So the first business that will go autonomous will be HGV and haulage. And at the moment, I think there's something like 300,000 people employed in the UK delivering stuff either B2B or B2C today. So, what happens to those human beings, and if they become unemployed, then what does that mean for the shift in society? And so it's just, as the pace of change quickens, the impact speeds up with it too, and the reaction speed that you have to have as a business and indeed an individual consumer goes along with it.
Yeah, Tim, I'm sure you've had some interesting conversations with people that you've interviewed yourself and articles that you've written about driverless cars. What's your take on that in terms of the impact it's going to have and how soon it is going to have that big impact on the industry and society in general?
My views slightly diverge to Sean's in that I think it's really quite a long way away for fully autonomous, if fully autonomous is really achievable. I think it's such a significant engineering task, not just for the cars, but social engineering, the engineering within cities. I think maybe it will happen in certain kind of designated areas, but I don't know how widespread it would become. And there's the question of consumer acceptance on it. But I think it is really exciting where we see how driver assistance technologies now are helping us become more safer than we've ever had been. I'm driving a Volvo XC60. Well, I'm not at the moment, obviously, but I would be normally. And the amount of technology on that, the amount of fail-safes, should I don't know, not be paying attention or be trying to reverse out of a parking space or whatever, is remarkable. And I think it's technology that 20 years ago, people wouldn't have imagined was even kind of around the corner. So I do see that more and more that will come through. Whether it will ever reach the point where we can sit back and have a phone call or watch a film or whatever, I'm quite sceptical about that, to be honest.
I think, like you've all said, it's creeping up on us already, isn't it, based on the current range of vehicles. But shifting focus slightly, obviously the government are in everyone's spotlight at the moment with how they're reacting to COVID. But it is putting a lot of the spotlight on also how they're reacting to certain industries and what they could do more to support businesses within sectors like the automotive industry. Mike, what are your thoughts on that? What more could the government do to support the automotive industry?
I mean, a sort of wider, bigger piece is give us clarity as to where they actually want to get to. Sean mentioned it earlier on when we were talking about the drivetrains, etc. But getting it all joined up as to exactly what they want and when they want it to, that clarity would be really useful for the industry, because then we can react to it. It's the push from one area to another, and the fact that even now we're being, sort of electric is the charge, but there's still tax incentives for us to drive diesels that we're not supposed to be driving. So that clarity of purpose would be very useful, but I think that might be more than is achievable. I think that might be a pipe dream to ask for it. In the shorter term, I could see that we would end up in a form of a scrappage scheme coming back into the market. There's been a lot of talk around that. We're seeing pushes for that overseas as well. Lots of discussions in Germany as to what they're going to do with regards to that. So that could help give us a kickstart as we got after the financial crisis of 2008 to help the industry come up. And one of the other things I think is going to be vital for us as an industry is making sure there's no sort of cliff edge to the furlough scheme. As we were talking about earlier on, as we come out of the COVID crisis, we're going to be wanting to bring people back in gradually as the customers return and they get more comfortable with regards to buying cars and driving the miles and therefore getting them serviced. If there's a cliff edge, then unfortunately we're not going to need all the people on day one. So I think in the more short term, my wish is that the government finds a way of weaning us off the drug, as they've termed it, but it isn't just a going cold turkey on day one, because I think that would be very painful for a lot of businesses and a lot of people. So that's my short-term wish, and then medium-term, if we could get some form of incentive scheme to help the industry, a la scrappage, or that would be really, really useful.
Yeah, clarity is a word that a lot of our guests have used actually when it comes to the government and what they're doing. I suppose they've got a lot on their plate at the moment, in fairness.
Earlier in the year, when they announced bringing forward the EV deadline to 2035, the issue that we have to some extent is we have a government that's trying to get re-elected every 4 or 5 years, but we've got an industry that has to plan typically on 6-7 year product cycles. So even now, manufacturers will be looking at the cars that are coming in 10 years' time. And if we had more of that long-term planning published for the industry, then we could kind of cut our cloth accordingly.
Brilliant point.
Yeah, would you agree, Sean? What could the government do more for yourselves?
Yeah, well, Mike's alluded to a couple of the big ones. Clearly, the furlough scheme has worked incredibly well, and I was equally as surprised how successful that was. So they've done lots already, and I think people like to have a pop at the people in power, don't they? But I think they've done a lot to help our industry over the last few weeks anyway. For sure, they're making it up as they go along, so things are changing slightly, but I think they've done quite a lot. There's a couple of other things I think they could consider alongside some kind of scrappage scheme or a sort of cash for clunkers thing. The first one is around looking at consumer costs, because we all know that the rates are at record lows in terms of finance charges and so on. Bank of England base rates probably not going anywhere quickly. But the benefit in kind and VED prices, maybe there's some form of holiday incentive for buying new vehicles now to kind of get that part of the business moving. Because, the corollary of that is people are going to be saying, oh, used cars, value for money, cheaper price point. Without us getting the new car channel back working, 2, 3, 4 years from now, we won't have that used car channel to continue to make the profit on. So we've got to look at both things at the same time. But one thing that Mike's already touched on a little bit, that is going to be the most critical, and the government could really help here, is around the working capital squeeze when we actually reopen for trading properly. That's actually more dangerous than the position that most of us are in right now, to be frank, because lots of people have helped out with holidays and deferments and so on. So that's going to be a massive squeeze, but we know the civil loan system doesn't appear to be working either. Certainly not in terms of the volume of loans coming into the industry. So I think the government could effectively move that underwrite capability to the captive finance houses. So particularly if, using BMW as an example, if BMW FS were able to get that 80% underwrite for a loan to one of their franchise businesses, then actually that's probably a much quicker and easier way for businesses like ours to tap into some support funding, as would be the other manufacturer partners as well.
Yeah, let's hope they're listening to you guys. Hopefully Boris is a Armchair show subscriber. On his downtime, perhaps he listens to us. But yeah, I think they're all great ideas. As we say, let's just hope your voices are being heard on this. That's part of the reason we do these shows. I think finishing on a kind of positive note, obviously the automotive industry is fueled by young talent. At the moment, obviously people are in all sorts of different scenarios and situations. What do you think the industry can do to attract new talent to the automotive industry?
There was going to be more change in this industry over the course of the next 10 to 15 years than there ever has been in that timescale. It's really exciting with the different things that are happening from either a drivetrain point of view or the way we're dealing with customers and the new technology and all that sort of coordinated thing that's coming together as we move forwards. And I think we just need to get some of that excitement and the fact that we're not, the media still loves to portray us, particularly the mainstream media, as sheepskin coated used car salesmen who are trying to rip people off. And the industry needs to keep doing the job to show that it's a great place to work. It's full of exciting people, and there's so much more going to happen over the course of the next 10 years that from a young person's perspective will give them something fun to have a go at. And they can help develop the future of the industry. If we can get that message across, then I think we'll get some great talent in to help us navigate that change.
Yeah, definitely. Sean, how do you think we can get that message across?
Yeah, I think we just need to do more self-publicity. And, Mike's hit on a key fundamental thing for me, because we do the schools and apprentice recruitment, all of that sort of stuff as you'd expect. But the perception is, why would I want to work in a garage? And it's like, well, no, hang on a minute. You don't understand how multifaceted and technologically advanced these businesses are now. And the facilities are amazing too. But the thing that I think is the number one draw for the motor business full stop is that you can actually succeed and develop and grow through the business with no qualifications or no prior experience. You know, I've got senior managers in my business who started off cleaning cars, and it still exists today. If you work hard in this business and apply yourself, the rewards can come to you too. There's a great industry camaraderie. I mean, even just the example of the last we've had today, kind of doing this, that is widespread across not only our business but also the individual networks and the wider motor business as well. And we've got some great training and development schemes too. I mean, you know, through the IMI and the AMA and all the apprenticeship development schemes. You know, the motor business it's a terrific place to work. And I just don't think we do a good enough job of promoting that outside of the promotion to ourselves. I mean, I can't envisage doing anything else before I retire, certainly not. And equally, the people that turn up every day to the same place at our gaff, they are the business. You know, we sell cars and we service them and we provide a service to customers, but really we're a collection of people, and that is the value of our businesses.
What an inspiring note to end on, I think. It's just what we need at the moment, really. We've run out of time, I'm afraid, guys, but thanks so much for coming on and putting down your Peloton bikes and your pizzas and your dogs and everything, and work, obviously. And no, we really appreciate you joining us. And hopefully we'll get you back on the show and ideally in the studio with Tanisha, where she's the lucky one today. She's in the lovely confines of a studio.
You guys were amazing. I'm looking forward to getting this show out. So thank you so much. Brilliant.
That just leaves it for me to say thank you for listening or watching. And if you are watching on YouTube, if you can subscribe and click on the little bell icon, that will give you a notification whenever we post a new show. Until then, stay safe and we'll see you next time.